There was a time when the name James Irlam and Sons meant something. It stood for reliability, respect, and roots, built not in a boardroom but on the cab floors of northern England. This wasn't just another transport company. This was a family-run business that grew from one man's hard work into a regional powerhouse, known for its no-nonsense attitude and fiercely loyal drivers. But in the ruthless world of modern logistics, loyalty rarely wins. And by the end of the 2000s, James Irlam was no longer an independent name. It was a sticker slapped on the side of a Stobart lorry. The story begins in the 1940s, just after the war, when James Irlam himself started with a single truck, hauling milk churns in and out of Manchester. Like many post-war British entrepreneurs, he didn't have a flashy business plan or a shiny office. What he had was grit, local knowledge, and a knack for keeping things moving when the rest of the country was stuck. His sons joined him as soon as they were old enough, and what began as a humble operation slowly snowballed into one of the most respected transport firms in the UK. By the 1990s, James Irlam and Sons was running hundreds of vehicles across Britain. Their red and silver lorries were instantly recognizable on the M6, often pulling high-volume loads for supermarkets, food producers, and retail giants. They had a reputation for punctuality, professionalism, and treating drivers like people, not just payroll numbers. The workforce was tight-knit. Many had been with the company for over a decade. If you drove for Erlam, you wore the badge with pride. But behind the scenes, the industry was changing fast. Fuel prices were rising. Regulation was tightening, and bigger logistics firms, backed by private equity and driven by cutthroat efficiency, were swallowing smaller outfits whole. That's where Eddie Stobart came in. Now, Eddie Stobart wasn't just a competitor, it was a brand. A name that had gone from a family business to a corporate machine with celebrity status. Stobart Group had gone public. Their trucks had names, fan clubs, merchandise, and TV shows. But as glamorous as the image was, Stobart's strategy was aggressive: expand rapidly, centralize operations, and absorb anything in its path. In 2008, the inevitable happened. James Irlam and Sons was sold to the Stobart Group in a deal worth $59 million. At first, there were promises. The Erlam name would live on, operations would stay local, and jobs would be safe. The transition was swift. Uniforms changed, fleet colors changed. Suddenly, the silver trucks were gone, replaced by Stobart green. Erlam's depots were integrated into the wider Stobart logistics network. Routes were reshuffled. Drivers who'd spent decades under the Erlam name found themselves under new management, with new systems, new protocols, and a very different atmosphere. The family-run culture, one that put drivers and relationships first, started to erode. It wasn't just a rebrand, it was an erasure. There was no space for sentimentality in the Stobart playbook. Efficiency came first. Where Erlam once worked on trust and handshake deals, Stobart brought in analytics, metrics, and corporate oversight. You didn't just drive a route, you hit KPIs. Missed a delivery window, got stuck in traffic, that's your performance report dinged. For many old hands, this new world didn't fit. Some left, others were pushed out, and slowly but surely, the name James Irlam faded from the roads. It wasn't just painted over, it was deleted from the company's public image, and that right there is what stung the most. Not the deal, not the logistics, but the way the legacy was brushed aside. James Irlam built something rare, a transport company that was efficient without being ruthless, competitive without being cold, human. And in just a few years, that entire culture was swallowed up by a machine that valued marketing campaigns more than driver loyalty. By 2010, barely anyone outside the industry even remembered that Erlam used to be its own company. It was just another part of Stobart logistics, another cog in a corporate wheel that kept turning faster and faster. But the question remains, was this always going to happen? In a world where bigger eats smaller, was James Irlam doomed from the moment logistics became a numbers game? Or could things have been different if the industry hadn't sold its soul to shareholder value? Because what happened to James Irlam wasn't just a business deal, it was the story of a family-run success, built on decades of hard work, being paved over by the modern obsession with growth at all costs. And the worst part? It wouldn't be the last time. After the takeover, what remained of James Irlam was little more than a memory, and for many former drivers, mechanics, and depot staff, that memory came with a bitter aftertaste. See, it wasn't just a matter of changing uniforms or repainting lorries. The shift went deeper. The Erlam way of doing things was personal. Local managers had the freedom to make decisions. Drivers knew the rats inside and out because they'd been running them for years. There was mutual respect, and in the world of haulage, that meant everything. But under Stobart's centralized system, it all changed. Planning was done at headquarters, routes were handed down from logistics software, time windows were tighter, and the focus wasn't on the human behind the wheel, it was on metrics, performance reviews, delivery targets, fuel efficiency reports. Every mile, every minute, every drop of diesel was now tracked, measured, analyzed. For the drivers who had spent their careers with Erlam, the shift was like being dropped into another world. You were no longer trusted to do your job. You were monitored doing it, and slowly, morale dropped. Some of the older hands simply packed it in. They didn't want to be GPS tracked like suspects. They didn't want to be told by a screen when to brake or when to sleep. Others stuck it out, hoping the culture might improve. But it didn't. To make matters worse, the Stobart group itself wasn't exactly stable. While the brand was huge, the company had become a strange hybrid, part haulage, part investment vehicle. It dabbled in biomass, rail freight, even airports. It had fingers in everything. But when you try to do everything, you often lose grip on the basics, like taking care of the people who actually keep your lorries on the road. And so, former Erlam depots began to close or shrink. But perhaps the most galling moment for many came in 2014 when the Stobart Group sold off its transport business, the very part that included the former Erlam fleet, to a new company, Eddie Stobart Logistics, backed by private equity. This new version was no longer the original Stobart family business, but a corporate beast with shareholders to please and costs to cut. The Erlam name by that point was completely gone, swallowed up, sold off, written out of history. And that's the heart of it. This wasn't just a business takeover, it was a cultural extinction. James Irlam wasn't flashy. It wasn't built for headlines or TV shows. It was built on reputation, on trust, on drivers who knew their jobs and customers who knew they could rely on them. When that kind of company disappears, it leaves a gap far bigger than its fleet. You hear echoes of it even today in Facebook groups for ex-Erlam drivers, in archived photos of those iconic silver trucks, in old high-vis jackets still hanging in garages. For those who lived it, the pride still lingers, but so does the pain, because this isn't a story about failure. James Irlam didn't fail. It was thriving when it was sold. It didn't collapse under bad management or scandal. It was efficient, respected, and rooted. But in an era where bigger meant better, where branding and stock price trumped heritage, that wasn't enough. What happened to James Irlam is a cautionary tale for anyone who believes the haulage industry is just about logistics. It's not. It's about people, about knowing your driver's name, not just their ID. About local routes, not just central algorithms. About caring who wears your company's name on their back. And once that's gone, you can't buy it back, no matter how many logos you slap on a truck. James Irlam was more than a transport company. It was part of Britain's working class backbone, and it deserved better than to be buried in someone else's brand.